I transmigrated into the body of a big shot's cannon fodder wife. The system wanted me to be the ultimate simp, the sleeping wife. It also promised I'd inherit the big shot's billions later. But 3 years passed, and this guy, Mark, was still totally healthy. The system and I were getting pretty desperate. Hey host, do you think we'll ever get to see him kick the bucket and finish this mission? No sooner had I said it, than the housekeeper, Martha, slid onto her knees in front of me, sobbing her eyes out. Ma'am, you gotta go see Mr. Smith. He's in the hospital. I happily rushed to the hospital, only to be told Mark was just there for a checkup. And the checkup was for trying to have a baby. I was floored. Trying to have a baby with who? Me? Mark's health was just too good. For 3 years, he hadn't even coughed, let alone gotten sick. So, even with Martha on her knees, crying like he was on his deathbed, I was a little skeptical. Mark, is he really in the hospital? Martha nodded emphatically. Absolutely, ma'am. Mr. Smith didn't even go to work today. He went to the hospital first thing this morning. He also told us to tell you to come over when you woke up, said he had something important to tell you. The cloud-shaped system on my shoulder and I exchanged a look, both seeing excitement in the other's eyes. This is great, host. 3 years, and finally Mark is sick. And from the sound of it, he's on his way out. He's probably calling you over to give you his last will and testament. Host. Our hard times are over. The system happily zipped around on my shoulder. I was happy too, but since Martha was still there, I had to pretend to be devastated. I took a few steps back, shaking my head and biting my lip. How could this be? Mark has always been so healthy, I don't believe it. With that, I turned and dashed upstairs, changed into a white outfit, then clattered back down, grabbed my car keys, and bolted out the door. Martha sighed dramatically behind me. The missus really does love Mr. Smith. Look how anxious she is, she even ran out of her shoes. How could I not be anxious? What if I didn't make it in time, and Mark got mad and wrote me out of his will before he kicked it? We're not talking about a few $1,000s, we're talking about billions. Ugh, who designed this garden? These gravel paths are killing my feet, it really hurts. The system cheered me on in my ear. Hang in there, host. Once you've seen Mark off, you can tear down this garden and carpet the whole thing if you want. I figured, yeah, you're right. I gritted my teeth, sped through the garden, hopped on my moped at the front gate. Helmet on, throttle twisted, and I was off in a flash. At the hospital, I parked my moped. The system slipped a garlic clove into my small purse. Host, rub this on beforehand, on your tear ducts. Rub and cry, works like a charm. My eyes immediately started stinging. So, I stumbled into the hospital, 1 foot stinging, practically running. Honey, don't die on me. What am I going to do if you die? Crying, I found a nurse. Excuse me, ma'am, do you remember a Mr. Smith who was admitted today? Do you know which room he's in? The nurse looked bewildered. Huh? Smith what? We don't have any patients named Smith admitted today. I froze. The system rubbed its chin. Could it be, not this hospital? Did we go to the wrong one? I pulled out my phone and looked at the address Martha had sent. No, it's right. That's weird. The nurse checked the admission list again, shaking her head apologetically. Really, no one. Maybe you should check the outpatient building up front? Maybe your family member hasn't finished their checkup yet, and the doctor hasn't arranged for admission. That made some sense. Walking barefoot hurt too much, so I asked the system to conjure up a shoe for me, and I secretly put it on in the bathroom. The system disapproved. Putting on shoes won't show how anxious you are. I rolled my eyes at it. You, system, have no idea how to be flexible. When I find Mark, I can just take them off again, can't I? System, I can't unconjure things once they've been used, so don't ask me to make them disappear later. I patted my small purse. It's fine, I'll just stuff them in my bag then. My phone jingled. I answered, and the butler, Mr. Peterson, was on the other end. Ma'am, Martha said you're at the hospital. Where are you now? I'll come pick you up. Pick me up? Then how would I show my eagerness and concern for Mark? I wiped my face with the garlic clove again and replied. I'm already at the hospital. I looked all over the inpatient department and couldn't find him. I'm so worried. Mr. Peterson, just tell me where Mark is, and I'll find my own way there. Mr. Peterson gave me an address. I followed the address to the right floor, took off my shoes in the elevator and shoved them in my bag, then wiped on more garlic. The system mused. Good thing no one else is in the elevator with us, or they'd think we're crazy. I was a little nervous, so I pinched its cloud mouth. Little mouth, zip it. Don't say another word later, don't distract me. Also, watch the time. If I can't cry later, pinch me a few times. The system gave me an okay sign. As soon as I stepped out of the elevator, I started crying and jogging, found the right room number, and burst in. Mark, how are you, Mark? I'm so worried. My forehead hit a solid wall of a person. I looked up blankly and saw Mark's cool, distinguished face. He looked down at me, his brows slightly furrowed, and raised a hand to smooth my hair. Why are you so flustered? And why are your shoes off? Aren't you cold? Oh my goodness, someone tell me, why is Mark standing here perfectly fine? Didn't they say he was sick? But looking at his face, he didn't seem sick at all. In fact, he looked healthier than I did. The garlic stung my eyes so much I couldn't stop crying. Mark, you're not sick. It's really so great that you're okay. It's really so bad that you're okay. Awful morning, very unhappy to be of service. Mr. Peterson was deeply touched. I was worried you didn't like Mr. Smith, ma'am, but now it's clear you're incredibly worried about him. Seeing you two so in love, I can rest easy. You're resting easy too soon. I'm worried about Mark's money. It's been 3 years, why isn't this guy kicking the bucket yet? They said he was a sickly CEO, with stomach problems, rare blood type, depression, and mania. With all those ailments, is he a turtle? How is he so durable? Even with all my internal grumbling, all I could do was cry, leaning into Mark's arms. Mr. Peterson then turned to Mark and said, Mr. Smith, you don't have to agonize anymore. Your wife has always loved you, and she must really want to have a child with you. Mark hummed, his chest vibrating, which made my head feel a little numb. He helped me up from his embrace, looked at me, his expression serious, and asked gently. Grandma's been pressuring us to have kids lately, and we've been married for 3 years. It's time, don't you think? The garlic's kick was too strong. My eyes were almost shut from the stinging, and tears kept flowing. I blinked and nodded dazedly. Okay. Wait, no, what kid? After listening to a few more conversations between Mr. Peterson and Mark and the doctor, I finally understood. Turns out, Mark wasn't sick at all, he was just at the hospital for a checkup. He'd told Martha to have me come over so I could get a checkup too. And the purpose of the checkup was to try and have a baby. Holy cow. I thought Mark was dying, that my miserable days were over. Turns out Mark wanted me to have a baby, and my mediocre, chill days were over. I wiped away my tears, feeling emo, and let the doctor examine me. They even drew 3 vials of blood, which hurt so much. After all the tests were done, Mark was still waiting outside. When he saw me, he reached out and gently patted my head. Sunlight illuminated the side of his face, his dark eyes were beautiful, and his drooping eyelashes glowed warmly in the light. As if sensing my mood, he asked. Not happy? I forced a smile, no. Of course, I wasn't happy. Who would be happy being suddenly told they had to have a baby? I really didn't want to do something that benefited others at my own expense. Don't you have a first love or a crush or something? Couldn't you just ask someone else to have a baby for you? Why me? Mark paused. What? I realized my words were inappropriate and held back the rest, stepping forward to hug him. Nothing, let's go home. The system chirped in my ear. No way, host. If Mark has a baby with someone else, you'll only inherit half the estate. Half of several hundred billion is still billions. Even if I only got 10 billion, I couldn't spend it all. Even a tenth would be plenty. The system was frustrated. Can't you have a little ambition? Me, didn't I just tell you to shut up? Don't distract me. The system meekly owed and stopped talking. Mark was still holding me, then suddenly leaned down and sniffed, asking hesitantly. Daisy, why do you smell like garlic? My heart dropped. I quickly pushed him away. No way, you must have smelled wrong. All right, stop standing around, let's go home. Mark took my hand. Just a bit longer, I sent Mr. Peterson to buy some shoes, he'll be right back. His hand was so warm, big and bony, holding it made my heart pound uncontrollably. I awkwardly pulled my hand away, then casually pulled my shoes out of my bag and put them on. Let's go, I have shoes. Mark's eyes narrowed slightly, his voice tinged with doubt and coolness. Daisy, didn't you say you were so worried about me that you ran out of your shoes? Now this is. I swear, if I'd known, I would have signed up for that etiquette class the system recommended back then. At least I could have kept up appearances, projected some confidence. Now look at me, awkward and blurting out nonsense whenever I'm embarrassed. I looked down at the shoes on my feet, then at Mark, wanting to cry. They did fall off. I picked these up on the street, someone didn't want them. Good thing the system hadn't given me a matching pair. Mark's expression was unreadable. Next time, don't pick up random things on the street. You might get athlete's foot. I nodded furiously, won't pick them up again, won't pick them up. Mark's germophobia seemed to kick in. After finding out I'd picked up someone else's shoes, he didn't hold my hand anymore. He even secretly wiped his hands with a wet wipe behind my back. I sighed in relief and meekly followed him out of the hospital. Mr. Peterson drove up, and Mark opened the back passenger door for me. I thought about it, a little awkward. Mark, maybe, we should go separately. Honestly, I really wanted to get in the car and use this rare chance to spend time with him and build our relationship. But the weather was awful. My moped was still parked out in the open. If I left with Mark, wouldn't it get soaked if it rained tonight? It's been with me for 3 years, I'd be heartbroken if it got ruined. Mark frowned. You drove here? I hesitated, then nodded, yeah. A moped is a vehicle, why wouldn't it count? Mark closed the car door and waved to Mr. Peterson. Mr. Peterson, you go on ahead. I'll ride with Daisy. Mr. Peterson nodded and zoomed off, leaving me standing there, a mess in the wind. Did Mark eat something weird? He seems a bit clingy. Mark looked at me, as if asking, why aren't you leaving yet? I forced a smile. All right, let's go. Mark stood in front of the moped, looking like he wanted to say something but couldn't. I looked at his perfectly tailored suit, opened my mouth, but no words came out either. After a long silence, Mark finally broke it. He sighed softly, swung his leg over the moped, and said, his voice resigned. Let's go. I rubbed my nose, handed him the key, and sat on the back. System. You're something else, host. Getting a billionaire CEO to ride a moped with you. I was unashamedly confident. He wanted to come with me, it's not like I forced him to ride a moped. Besides, what's wrong with a moped? It's convenient and eco-friendly, and it's fun to ride. And what's the big deal about a billionaire CEO? His ancestors, his great-great-great-great ancestors, weren't they common folk too? Riding a moped isn't exactly beneath him. System, all right, whatever you say, he's your husband anyway. I immediately retorted, your husband. System, your husband. I was about to go another 300 rounds with the system when Mark, who was riding the moped, suddenly spoke. Daisy, what did you just say? Me, huh? I didn't say anything just now. I was communicating with the system directly in my head, not moving my mouth. Mark, didn't say anything? Then maybe I misheard. I immediately became alert. System, can Mark read minds? System, no way. I don't sense any other systems around. It patted my shoulder with its cloud paws. Don't worry, host, I had the main system scan this world early on. It's just us two anomalies, no one else. That's good. I still trust the system's promises. The moped suddenly slammed on its brakes. Unaware, I lurched forward and hit Mark's back. Before I could react, the moped sped off again. I was startled, almost thrown off, and immediately hugged Mark's waist. Once I steadied myself, I finally had time to look up. Is it really jammed up ahead? Why the sudden stop and go? I almost got thrown off, that was so dangerous. Mark's voice was clear and soft. No, there was a pothole in the road just now, I swerved to avoid it. My bad. I looked back, but saw no pothole. The system zipped around nearby, then flew back to my shoulder. I didn't see a pothole either. But, host, Mark seems to be in a really good mood, he's smiling. Do you think he did it on purpose, just to get you to hug him? My head feels itchy, like I'm finally growing a brain. Mark is acting really weird. Is it because he's trying to have a baby, and with spring here, he's just feeling frisky? System, is that something you can even say? I scratched my head. Well, what else? It makes no sense. It's not like he suddenly discovered my beauty and fell in love with me, right? System, host, you're a little too conceited. I thought so too. Even though I'm pretty good looking, Mark is a billionaire. He's been to so many film festivals and awards ceremonies, I can't even count them. What kind of beautiful women hasn't he seen? Can't figure it out, so I'm not going to think about it. Mark's body is really nice. I can feel distinct muscles even through his clothes. The feel is amazing. I couldn't help but pinch him. Mark hissed softly, "What are you doing?" I immediately pulled my hand back. "Sorry, your body's so good, I couldn't help myself for a moment." System, host, he's smirking again. Smiling? That's just human nature. Who doesn't love a compliment? I wanted to feel him up a bit more, but then I worried he'd think I wanted to have a baby with him. After a moment of internal debate, I took my hand off Mark's waist and grabbed the seat instead. But as soon as I let go, the moped suddenly braked again. Mark, my bad, slipped. Fine. The very next second, he took off like a shot again. Mark said, utterly unrepentant. Sorry, I twisted the throttle too hard. My fingernails were practically splitting from gripping the seat, just to keep myself from being thrown off. Before I could even catch my breath, another sudden stop. Mark, sorry, the green belt ahead was too wide, it startled me. What does that have to do with a green belt? He's not even trying to fake it anymore, is he? The system clucked twice. Host, you should just hold him. Otherwise, with all this braking and starting, when are we ever going to get home? My hand gripping the seat was visibly veined, I gritted my teeth. It's fine, I can handle it. System, but your moped might not be able to handle it. All that braking and starting is pretty hard on the battery, right? Alright, I caved. For the sake of my beloved ride, a little hardship is nothing, boo-hoo. I raised my arms and wrapped them around Mark's waist. Feeling his firm muscles, I thought, this isn't hardship at all. His body feels so good. I wonder how he trained it. I'm pretty direct by nature. If I have a question, I like to ask it outright. Mark, how long do you train every day? Your physique is amazing. Mark paused, then answered, half an hour. I was thoughtful. Oh, that's pretty efficient. By the way, you're... The system clapped its cloud paws over my mouth, utterly horrified. What, here and there? What are you saying that won't pass censorship? You can be direct, but not that direct. What are you even asking? Of course, I was asking about that. Didn't everyone say that gym bros weren't that great in that department? System, but Mark is almost trying to have a baby with you, won't you just find out directly then? No way, this is important stuff, so I needed to ask beforehand to be prepared. Besides, I see everyone online asking this. No matter what the other person is talking about, you can always follow up with, oh, by the way, you're. It flows pretty well. System, exasperated, don't copy everything. You're an adult, filter some of this stuff out. Mark, who hadn't heard the rest of my sentence, asked curiously. Where? I swallowed my theory about the relationship between working out and that, and said. Your chest muscles. I was asking about your chest muscles. How are your chest muscles? Can I feel them? Mark looked uncomfortable. In public like this, isn't that a bit inappropriate? I chuckled mischievously. It's fine, my moped has a wind cover, right? I'll just feel them discreetly, no one will see. I didn't get to feel them. Because I wasn't wearing a helmet, a traffic cop pulled me over. He said he was going to fine me $20. I said, huh? Does the back passenger have to wear a helmet now too? The cop looked stern. What, is the back passenger's head made of iron? It won't get messed up if you fly off in a crash. The policy for back passengers to wear helmets has been in effect for a while now. Haven't you been riding your moped until today? Boo-hoo, I used to ride by myself, I never carried anyone. Mark didn't know either. Probably the first time in his life he'd been pulled over and lectured, his usually cool demeanor looked a little embarrassed. I patted his shoulder in comfort. The cop said we had to stand at the intersection and wait for the next person without a helmet before we could leave. Mark looked at me, I looked at him, we just stared at each other. Martha called. Ma'am, when are you two coming home? Did something happen on the road? Why are you taking so long? How was I supposed to explain to her that I took Mark, in his suit, on a moped, and we got detained by a traffic cop for not wearing a helmet? Today was probably the only black mark on Mark's life resume. We waited over 10 minutes, and finally caught the next person without a helmet, also a back passenger. Seeing the other person look bewildered as they were detained, I felt much better. These kinds of things are really awkward alone, a little awkward with two people, but with three, it starts to get a little funny. After all that hassle, we finally got home. Martha had already made dinner and was eagerly waiting. Because of what happened on the road, I didn't dare look at Mark and just buried my head in my food. After eating, I went to my room to shower. After all, I'd been running barefoot in the hospital for half the day, it was pretty dirty. After showering, I realized I hadn't brought clothes. I pressed the call button in the bathroom and asked Martha to get me some pajamas. Martha happily brought the clothes, closed the door, and left. I took a look and felt they were a bit thin. New pajamas? What material are these? Are they really this small when folded? I shook out the clothes and saw a lace top and a short skirt. System, oh, I know this one. This is one of those ways humans add a little spice to their int. This time it was my turn to cover its cloud mouth. Don't talk nonsense, Martha must have grabbed the wrong thing. So I pressed the call button again, but no one answered. I had no choice but to put them on, at least they were some kind of fabric. I figured I'd find something more decent to wear later. There was so little fabric, I felt really uncomfortable, so I wrapped the bath towel around myself too. That made me feel a bit better. I peeked through the crack in the bathroom door and didn't see anyone in the room. I crept out and went to the closet, starting to rummage for clothes. Suddenly, the door creaked open. I jumped, spun around, and saw Mark walking in. His hair was still wet, and he was only wrapped in a bath towel. His eyes were probably reddened from the steam. Unlike his cold demeanor when he wore a suit, Mark at this moment looked easy to bully. Host, why do you think he looks easy to bully? In this situation, he's clearly about to bully you, hey. Because of what the system said, my mind, which had been captivated by Mark's physique, immediately returned. I raised my hand to stop Mark, who was approaching and trying to get even closer. Oh, heavens, men and women shouldn't touch. Sir, do not tempt this humble nun further. You know, this humble nun was born without a husband. How could she resist such temptation? Mark really seemed to want to have a baby with me. He didn't put on any clothes, and after seeing me, he even untied the bath towel around his waist. I immediately covered my face. No, I'm not ready yet. Mark sat on the edge of the bed, his voice a little helpless. We've been married for 3 years now. How much longer do you need to prepare? 3 years ago, you said you were too young and embarrassed to do that with me. He reached out and took my hand, pulling me closer, his expression serious. But Daisy, I'm 30. If we wait any longer, I'm afraid my body won't be able to handle it. 30 and already can't handle it? Is that saying about men hitting 60 after 25 actually true? I tugged at my bath towel, making sure it was tied tightly, and that gave me some sense of security. I hesitated, then spoke. Even though we've been married for 3 years, we don't have an emotional connection. Doing that without an emotional connection is like a strong acid. Mark was silent, and after a moment, he seemed a little unresigned. 3 years ago, I asked you what kind of husband you wanted me to be, and you said someone with lots of money, not much to do, and ideally, we'd see each other once every 6 months. You also said you hated clingy people, that giving money was giving love, and seeing each other every day was annoying. Daisy, now you're saying I haven't given you enough companionship, that we don't have an emotional connection. Do you have a heart? I froze. Did I really say something like that? The system nodded. Yeah, I think you did. Host, I think you also said you liked being a simp. Like, the kind where the more you simp, the colder the other person gets, and you just love that unrequited feeling. Oh, geez, no wonder Mark has been so cold all these years. He thought he was flirting with you. Oh no, now that it mentioned it, I think I do remember. Back then, to fool Mark, when I first met him, I really did say something like that. But at the time, I thought he was a goner, that he'd kick the bucket within 3 years, so I was just spouting nonsense. Now, this guy is not only alive and well, he hasn't even coughed once in 3 years. Mark was still staring at me, stubbornly wanting an answer. I picked at my fingers and asked. Do you have a first love, a true love, or anything like that? You can do that with them. I'm really good at playing the sleeping wife. Mark didn't force me. He even said that since I needed companionship, he'd give me plenty of it. He'd wait until I felt our emotions were strong enough before we started trying for a baby. He's so serious, I'm so scared. System, did you mess up some information? Are we really on the script where I wait for the big shot to die and inherit his billions? Or is this some domineering CEO falls madly in love, reluctant wife can't escape script? The system sounded a little annoyed. How could I mess up? Don't you dare question my professional integrity. Then it rummaged around for a while, pulled out a small transparent electronic screen, and pointed to the script for me. See, it says in the book that he's super sick and will die soon. After he kicks it, you inherit the fortune and get to have a dozen 18-year-old male models. Oh. Isn't that like the ultimate fantasy for me? The next second, I slumped again. It doesn't matter how great it is, we're stuck on Mark now. Why is he so healthy? It doesn't make sense. Is he taking some kind of super tonic? The system was also stumped, saying. Don't worry, host, I'll go ask the main system. Alright, I'll wait a bit longer. Life, is an endless wait. This wait lasted until dark. I didn't get any news from the system, but Mark came home from work. Martha was delighted. It's been years, and Mr. Smith finally knows to come home for dinner. Mr. Peterson saw the bouquet of roses in Mark's hand and was relieved. This is wonderful. After all these years, Mr. Smith finally humbled himself and learned to express his love. He doesn't have to secretly watch the surveillance of his wife at home from the office anymore. Watch what? Me? Are there cameras everywhere in the house? Is Mark, that jerk, secretly watching me from the office every day? So he sees me slinking around the house all day, talking to myself, punching and kicking the air? And even after all that, he still loves me and wants to have a baby with me? That's pretty messed up. Mark said he wanted to sleep with me. His excuse, to build our relationship. He was wearing a little bear pajama set, his usually cool face completely serious. How can we build our relationship without physical contact? I was fed up. Does it have to be physical contact? Can't we build it mentally first? So, by your logic, all dating has to start with making out, huh? Mark's ears turned red. Can we? Can we what the heck? I pointed to the door, out. I'm not sleeping with you. Mark stubbornly shook his head. No. We're married, we're legally wed. I'm sleeping in the same bed as you. So clingy, I can't stand it. I really missed the old, aloof Mark. I wish I hadn't talked all that nonsense yesterday about needing companionship and building our relationship. Now look, I dug my own grave, and I have to lie in it. After a stalemate, I got into bed with a cold expression. Mark quickly got into bed too and even tucked me in. I closed my eyes, silently repeating, "It's fine, just pretend I'm sleeping with my pet dog for a night." The next second, Mark extended a long arm and pulled me into his embrace. He buried his head in my neck, his voice muffled. "Just for a bit. I won't do anything to you." I stayed stiff, not daring to move. But Mark was quite daring. As he held me, he started getting a little restless, beginning to kiss my hair. He made me ticklish, so I looked back at him. "You said you wouldn't do anything?" Mark breathed slightly, his voice hoarse. "My bad." He didn't try to argue, just apologized immediately. It made me feel awkward to question him further. Maybe he didn't do it on purpose, it's just a couple of kisses on my hair, not on my mouth. It's fine, it's fine. I turned my head back, closed my eyes, and forced myself not to overthink, just sleep. Just as I calmed down, Mark kissed the back of my neck again. "Mark, my bad." Then he kissed my cheek, and before I could even ask, he said again, "My bad." I got angry. Holy heck, is he using my bad as a comma now? I rolled over to face him, using my arm to create some distance. "Are you a pervert? You said you wouldn't do anything." Mark's cool face was now flushed with desire. He used his arm to pull me closer with force. His lips came down on mine, fierce and aggressive. After the kiss, another insincere "my bad." It was my bad all night, but his actions never stopped. I was so angry I bit him. He groaned, but his strength only increased. A chaotic night. The system was pulling my ear, frantically calling. "Host. Wake up. I have big news for you." I groggily opened my eyes and saw the system's cloud face filled with urgency. The main system says that due to temporal confusion, we transmigrated into a "chasing the husband" script, not the "inherit the fortune" one. In short, you have to be super cold to Mark, super incredibly cold. Then, after 3 years of suffering, you'll suddenly realize and start chasing him. What 3 years? What chasing the husband? I was fed up. Don't you think it's a little late? Where were you last night? I finally decided to enjoy Mark's body before he kicked the bucket. I finally accepted the fact of doing that with him, and now you're telling me I have to be cold to him? The system whined. I just found out, host. The main system held a last-minute meeting last night and discussed it all night. As compensation, you were originally supposed to have your heart and kidneys dug out, a tragic ending. Now you just have to chase him, a forced happy ending. My head was throbbing. Will there be a punishment if I don't do it? System, wah, if you don't do it, you'll follow the original plot, heart and kidneys dug out. So now, I have to be super, super cold to Mark? The system looked through its data for a long time, then cautiously checked the script again, shaking its head. No, we've already been here for 3 years. Now we're supposed to follow the post-3-year plot. You should be completely obedient to him, absolutely compliant. Great, back to being a simp, then. I'm good at this. But... System. You didn't change the heart and kidney ending as compensation, did you? For these 3 years, for the inheritance, my script with Mark has always been simp and unattainable ideal. When did I ever hurt his feelings? There's no need to chase him. The system looked guilty. Oh, it's all the same, the ending is the same anyway. Host, just be completely obedient to Mark now. Obedient my foot. Before I could even be obedient, Mark was already clinging to me like a puppy every day. If I really became obedient, wouldn't he just lock me in bed all day? Before I could even retort to the system, the bedroom door opened. Mark came in with breakfast, his eyes smiling. You're awake? Sorry, I couldn't control myself last night. Are you still uncomfortable? That familiar my bad again. I was practically developing a phobia of that phrase. He said my bad with his mouth, but his actions showed no remorse whatsoever. Stop doing bad things, hey. Mark was too clingy, he'd stick to me whenever he had time. He'd even follow me to the bathroom, practically wanting to be a conjoined twin. Good thing his work was busy. See, he's off on a business trip now. The system was speechless. So, as soon as he leaves, you come out and hire male escorts? I took a sip of juice and replied leisurely. Not at all, not at all. I'm here to scout out good talent for Mark's media company, to help him reduce his workload. The system scoffed. You say it so grandiosely, but in reality, aren't you still just hooking? I pinched its cloud mouth. Hey, system, why are your words so harsh? I'm not doing anything with them, it's purely appreciation, you understand? Actually, I was a bit stressed. I'd been hoping Mark would kick the bucket so I could inherit his fortune and live a lavish life. But now, he's perfectly healthy and sleeping with me. It's so surreal, and I'm so confused. The most terrifying thing is, I don't feel any resistance to Mark's closeness. That shouldn't be right. Did I really simp so hard that I actually fell in love with him? No way, I'm not a masochist. I couldn't figure it out, which is why I came to hire male escorts. To see if I only felt no resistance to Mark, or to all handsome guys. As long as you pay, male escorts can do many intimate things with you. I chose the lowest level of intimacy, holding hands and hugging. Holding hands was fine, only 2 out of 10 models who weren't handsome enough felt any resistance. Hugging, though, didn't work. Everyone felt weird. System, could it be that they're not handsome enough? If they were even more handsome, maybe hugging wouldn't feel resistant. I thought, you're right. But Mark is so ridiculously good-looking. Where can I find a male escort more handsome than him? The system was silent. Before it could figure anything out, the door burst open with a bang. I looked up and saw a furious Mark. System, oh no, host, quickly calm him down, don't let him turn evil. My brain raced. I got up and went to meet him, throwing myself into his arms before he could speak. Honey, you're finally here. I hired these escorts and only then did I realize that I truly only like you. I can't even hug them. Mark paused, his anger visibly dissipating quite a bit. He seemed to have misheard and asked me again. What did you say? I immediately chimed in. I said I found out I don't actually like handsome guys, I just like you. Honey, let's live a good life together from now on, and no more silent treatments, okay? Mark smiled, his voice gentle. You said it yourself this time. A flurry of sweet words led to a night of intense passion. This time, there wasn't even a my bad. He just kept making me say I loved him. I was utterly exhausted, feeling like I had nothing left, but Mark was still full of energy. At dawn, he put on his clothes and went for a morning run. Darn it, who said men were done for after 25? Mark said he'd make time to be with me, and he really did. He'd work from 9 to 5, and then spend all his remaining time with me. On weekends, he'd have online meetings at home, and as soon as he hung up, he'd take me out for a fancy dinner. Martha sighed. Mr. and Mrs. Smith have such a good relationship. Mr. Peterson cried. This is wonderful. After all these years, Mr. Smith finally has someone by his side. I cried. Mark, can you please not be so clingy? Can we go back to how things were before? You work, I'll still be your simp, and you can ignore me. How about it? Mark chuckled softly. Didn't you say when you hired those escorts last time that you loved me super much and wanted to be with me all the time? He brought up the escorts again. This guy was using that as a get-out-of-jail-free card. But the truth was, I was in the wrong, and I couldn't argue with him, boo-hoo. I had to suffer the consequences of my own words, even if it made me cry. At least the system was there to guide me. Host, I've figured it out. You don't resist Mark because you're naturally a masochist, but because Mark is actually pretty great. Even though he's been playing along with your simp and Ice Prince script, he hasn't actually ignored you. He sends you gifts for every holiday and even transferred $5.2 million as a New Year's gift. Because he's secretly been loving you all along, it's only natural you don't resist him and have feelings for him. A giant question mark suddenly appeared in my mind. What $5.2 million transfer? Are you saying Mark transferred $5.2 million to me every New Year? Then why do I only have $20,000 in my account? Sorry, host, sums like that usually only get released when the mission is complete. Our previous mission was to wait for Mark to kick the bucket, and since he hasn't, you haven't received them. I felt like I wanted to spit blood. Well, you could have at least told me. I thought I was a pauper this whole time, but actually, after 3 years, I had 3 sets of $5.2 million in my account. The system poked its fingers together. I thought the host didn't care about that small amount, since the inheritance is in the billions. I was speechless. The door opened, and Mark came home from work again. He quickly walked over, pulled me into his arms, and said in a husky voice, "Sweetheart, I missed you so much. If only you could come to work with me and be by my side all the time." No way was I going to work with Mark. Isn't it comfortable just being a couch potato at home? Why would I go looking for trouble? It was already hard enough being clingy with him every night, boo-hoo. If I were also clingy with Mark during the day, it would be a nightmare. Mark sensed my reluctance, and uncharacteristically, he didn't continue kissing me. Instead, he asked, "Daisy, do you not really like this kind of life?" I nodded furiously. "I want to travel." "You're too clingy, and I'm really uncomfortable." Mark was silent for a moment, then pulled out his phone. Half a minute later, my mobile banking app showed a transfer notification. I opened it and saw a full $10 million. I was a little stunned and looked up at Mark. Mark smiled and patted my head. "Go travel if you want. Even though I love you and want to be with you all the time, you're free." The next day, I grabbed my suitcase and, with the $10 million Mark gave me, embarked on my journey. The system was incredulous. You humans are so weird. Shouldn't you keep what you love locked by your side? Could it be that Mark doesn't love you as much as he shows? Otherwise, how could he bear to let you go? Isn't he afraid you'll take the money and run, and leave him? I didn't answer the system, feeling a little heavy-hearted. Mark, it seemed, loved me even more than I had imagined. I visited many countries. Mark would call me whenever he had time. Each time we hung up, he'd sound reluctant, but he never said, come back to me." He only wished me, "Have fun." I spent half a year adjusting my mindset, and my communication with Mark became smoother and smoother. When the first snow of winter fell, I took the earliest flight home. Martha wasn't there. Mark opened the door. As soon as the door opened, I hugged him tightly. "Mark, I'm home. I missed you so much." Mark kissed my forehead, his voice hoarse. Me too. Snowflakes fluttered down, and Mark took my hand, asking if I was willing to grow old with him. I said yes, very much yes. Thank you for giving me choices, for letting me be myself. Mark, I love you.